everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Speak Plainly podcast, where we speak plainly about things that matter. I am your host, Owl Medicine, and today's topic of things that matter is the sensation of adulting. I know that sounds really bizarre, but stick with me, and I promise you'll understand what I mean in a little bit, and definitely by the end. We all want to be more of an adult. I've been talking with a lot of friends recently, and we've been talking about kind of making decisions. Making good decisions, making bad decisions, what is a good decision or what is a bad decision, when and how to make them, all of that sort of stuff. We were talking about it in reference to our wise mind, which is a term taken from Marsha Linehan's CBT programs. And she says that there is an emotional mind and a rational mind, and above or separate from or between those two is what she calls a wise mind, which considers both the rational thoughts and the emotional thoughts. And you know those, I noticed that, I'm feeling that statements I've talked about on here, when it comes to trying to not identify with whatever emotion is happening, one of the best ways to get around that is to, instead of saying, I'm angry, it's like, no, your entire being is not the emotion of anger. Some of you is upset, some of you is angry, and so you say, I'm feeling that, I'm angry, or I'm noticing that I'm having this thought, or I'm noticing that I'm feeling. Well, the first I in that statement is the wise mind. It's the me that notices and doesn't identify with any part of myself, but exists in complexity of all of them. It's the I that recognizes that although there is clearly an emotional and a rational world, we live in neither. We live in a physical world that is a blending of the two. And the goal of the wise mind is to basically help us make better decisions, ones that consider the whole and, by virtue, hopefully don't make things worse. But this leads us to decisions that we can be proud of, or at least less ashamed of them. It's easy to feel ashamed about a decision if it's purely rational, as being calloused. And the same goes for emotional. If you make a purely emotional decision, we often beat ourselves up for being stupid. It's much harder to regret a decision that has heavily considered both the rational and the emotional. Because both the rational and the emotional mind have been thoroughly considered, many consequences have been thought out. And then it's not a matter of right and wrong, it's just a matter of making a decision. Because when you look at something long enough and you think about it deeply enough, you think of what brought you to this and where it could go after, and you realize that there are so many different things at play. It's not a matter of good or bad. It's not a matter of right and wrong. It's just a matter of making a decision. This is key. The wise mind, in my opinion, does not know right and wrong. It doesn't consider right and wrong. It doesn't believe in that because, well, it's wise. And it understands that right and wrong is always context dependent, and those decisions as to what's right or wrong can only be made after the decision has been made, looking at things in retrospect, comparing them to what our goals would have been. This brings me to my point of the sensations of adulting. Using the wise mind is adulting, as far as I can tell, because you are considering both the emotional and the rational. And that's honestly a great way to frame and understand adulting for me, because we don't really have any real road marks for adulting. You can get married or buy a house or take out a business loan, but those things don't make you an adult. They will eventually help turn you into an adult or make you behave as one later on down the road, but doing those things doesn't make you an adult. It turns you into an adult by forcing you into situations where your emotions and rational mind will fight, and the consequences of your decisions are great. So you can't be flippant about it. Okay, but how do you know if the decision that you are making is a good or bad decision? Because in the moment, we still want to know, is this good? Is this a good decision or is this a bad decision? Because that's how our brains work. Well, that's why this is all about the sensations of adulting. The best marker I can give you is somatic experiences. That's how you're going to tell if you are adulting. Now, somatic experiences is just a fancy, but I like it because it's a very accurate way of saying you have bodily sensations. None of us actually experience the world. We experience sensations stimulated by the world, interpreted by our brains. So sensations are our only experiential truth. What you feel is your reality, emotionally and physically. And this is why I try to bring everything back to somatic experiences. That's how we let anything in. That's how we experience the entire world. That's even how we put things into long-term memory. We put them into long-term memory by having a huge flux of neurotransmitters that give us a powerful physiological response or somatic experience. So it's my hope that by providing sensations as a blueprint for people, that they're able to access and understand these more subtle aspects of themselves, like the wise mind. The first thing that you need to know about somatic experiences of adulting, they don't feel good. They don't feel awful, but they don't feel good. They're not enjoyable. There's no resolution that comes when you make a wise mind decision. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. There is a weight that you feel lifted off of you when you make an adult decision, but that weight is not gone. If it feels like you're carrying the earth on your back, when you're done, maybe you're only carrying a half or like a third of the earth, but that weight is still there because you haven't found any resolution. It's, for me, it's like my wise mind is inside my head looking forward at both my emotional and my rational minds, listening to both of them fully, exploring all of the emotional and all of the rational consequences for any decision that I am looking at making. And when I look and listen long enough, the rationalizations and the emotions start repeating themselves. And after I listen to that a couple of times, I hear them start repeating themselves. That's when I know I've heard all of the arguments, right? Because my emotional mind does one thing. It's an emotional mind. It's meant to talk about my emotions. My rational mind does one thing. It's meant to talk about the rationality of my experiences and my life. They're not going to stop doing those things because that's what they are for. So I have to listen to them. But if I listen to just one or just the other, I will be led down two very different paths. So I have to blend them. I consider the rational and emotional minds our biological minds because I do not think that they're two sides of the same coin. Our emotional and limbic system help us navigate immediate threats, while our rational minds help us to navigate future ones. Our emotions and limbic system respond to subconscious cues that are too subtle for the rational mind to pick up on and keep us safe in the moment in our environment. Whereas the rational mind does not care about the subtle crap that's happening at all. It cares about the concrete, purely observable things because that's the best way to predict the future. And that's what rationality is mostly used for. So these are two different problems being solved by different parts of the brain happening simultaneously. That develops some issues. So since they are meant to solve two different sets of problems, they almost always disagree, and that's when we need an adultier adult to come help us. That adultier adult is our wise mind. our biological minds have gotten better over the years of experiencing life, that our emotions often don't just scream at us and make us feel like the whole world's going to die if we don't give in to our emotions. And the rational ones don't lead us down crazy fear paths as we grow and we get more experiences, but they still don't mature enough by themselves because they are singular. They do not have what it takes to blend the complexities or to even understand the complexities. They don't have what it takes to understand the complexity of life. The emotional mind is meant to deal with one set of issues, and the rational mind meant to deal with another set of issues. And those issues, the past or the future and the present are planning for the future and the present are happening simultaneously. So we are often feeling very at odds, and our wise mind has to come in and tell us what our next best step is. So I've often said that the mark of an adult is recognizing that problems don't really have solutions. Most problems that we tried to solve when we're younger, when we get older, we realize more and more about those problems, where they came from and where they're going, that sort of thing. And we realize that they aren't problems that need solutions. They are paradoxes that need management. And that's really important to recognize, because that fits beautifully with this framework, because our biological minds seek resolution. They're focused on the external problem. Our wise mind is focused on all of the problems simultaneously. There's an absolutely beautiful, ingenious thing happening in here where the wise mind prioritizes the self, both emotional and rational, over the problem. And that's what's so amazing. Both the emotional and rational mind are trying to solve their own problem. And that causes a third problem because they don't agree. The wise mind is able to blend the desires of both of them into one goal, leaving both sides a little less than resolved, but okay. They're happier than they were when there was still a problem, no resolution, and the resolution was trying to come around. And making a decision is its own form of resolution, but it doesn't resolve just the emotional or just the rational. So there's three problems altogether. And if you listen to your wise mind, you eliminate a biological solution in either direction, leaves one mind super happy and the other one very upset. That leaves one problem. You've appeased one of the two problems, but now you've created another. So you have two problems now instead of one, whereas if you had used the wise mind, you would be down to one problem. And then that also creates an imbalance within yourself of whether you are more rational or more emotional. And when that imbalance becomes uncharacteristic for us, because we all exist on different spots on the rational to emotional spectrum. And we all feel pretty comfortable with a little gradient in either direction of I'm kind of this much rational and this much emotional, and we have some wiggle room on either side. But when we just go with either the rational or the emotional, either one, we create an imbalance in our person. We create an imbalance in ourselves. So now we have two problems, but now we've created a long-term imbalance if we continue to make the decisions either purely rationally or purely emotionally. So there's a wisdom in this, and there's a beauty in this that kind of explains mathematically in a very loosey-goose kind of way why there is a weight that is lifted, but it's not gone. Whereas the resolution that we feel when we entertain a purely emotional or purely rational solution, we do feel a bit of resolution because one of those biological desires got what it wanted, whereas the other one didn't. So there is a feeling of resolution, but there's also simultaneously a feeling of betrayal. because whichever side you gave into, the other side feels betrayed. So we've now gone from having a problem, 2 problems, to 4 problems, all by not using our wise mind. Adult decisions don't feel great. Like I said, that's probably why we don't make them very often. Even if we do make them, we don't really know, because we don't know what they feel like internally. We know what fear feels like. We know what hunger feels like. We can recognize that. We know what pain feels like, and joy and worry. We know those sensations so well. And if we know the sensations that are created in our bodies when we use the wise mind, which is really just the sensation of wisdom, or at least applying wisdom, then we will have tangible benchmarks that nobody could ever take away or deny us as to whether or not we're making adult decisions, air quote, adult decisions, or making wise mind decisions. So another really important piece for this somatic experiencing part is that I get a weird relaxation in my belly. This is another important piece of the physiological experience of it. Now, I thought, when I first really noticed this, that it was because I carry most of my tension in my belly, and most Americans carry it in their shoulders or their back or something, but I carry my tension in my belly and in my legs. And I thought that was the reason I had this weird thing with my stomach when I recognized I was in my wise mind. And after talking to a bunch of people that are all very different from me, many of which have like upper back issues and tension and pain, they hold their tension in totally different places than I do. They also, every single person I've talked to about it, whenever they are in that same state, there is, of the wise mind, there is an emptiness, a pleasant, calm emptiness that runs from my belly button to my sternum. And if I get pulled into one mind or the other, one biological mind or the other, an automatic tension kind of sets in, because there is a tension created by the emotional mind and the rational mind trying to solve 2 different problems simultaneously. There's a tension involved in there, and the wise mind's job is to use that tension to move things forward towards a goal. So these are the sensations that I use to evaluate the quality of my decision making. Was there a big reward? Did I feel a big reward when I made the decision? If I did, probably not a wise decision. Did it feel like a resolution? Was I able to just breathe super easy after that and just be like, all right, it's done? If that's a yes, probably not a wise mind decision. Is there a calm and emptiness in my belly? Probably a wise adult decision. Does it feel like a weight has been lifted off of my shoulders and things are better, but I'm still not free? Probably an adult decision. Because that's life. That's totally life. As I mentioned before, there are certain things in life we do as a species and a culture that denote adulthood. Marriages, mortgages, and management. But they don't really mark adulthood. A childlike person with enough money or a fantastic resume or a dad with enough power can do any of those things. But they mark a time. These events mark a time where our decisions start having real and lasting consequences that become pretty unavoidable. So even an unwise child is forced to think about those decisions longer and harder to avoid present and future hardship. Doing that repeatedly naturally brings out the wise mind, and somebody has to evaluate our emotion and reason, and that somebody is you, the real you, the you that you were meant to be, the wise you. The wise you is not interested in winning the battle. It's not interested in solving whatever problem in the immediate. The wise you is interested in winning the war. And war is a bloody mess, always. even when it's happening entirely inside of us. Every side takes losses, and they're willing to take losses in hopes to attain a greater goal. The interesting thing in this is that the thing at war are the two parts of us. If we don't unify them with a goal, we're living through the hell of war for no reason at all. This is the final key. The final key to adulting isn't a sensation, but it is necessary. It's a goal. I've talked about the wise mind and the emotional mind and the rational mind and all the decision-making stuff, and I've mentioned this goal. That war analogy does a really wonderful job of explaining why we need a goal. Because right now, the things at war inside of you are your biological, emotional mind and your biological, rational mind. They are meant to both be wielded by you. They are meant to serve you. Your emotions serve to keep you alive. Your brain and your rationality serves to keep you alive. They specialize in different things, but they both serve a same purpose. They serve the purpose of their master, which is you. And if the master doesn't have a plan, they're just going to keep bickering because what one wants is not what the other one wants. And without someone to take charge and say, you want this, here's a goal that both of you can get what it is that you really, really want. You might not get all of it, but both will be advanced. That's how we learn to be adults and navigate the adult world. So we have to have a goal. We at least have to have a goal of how we want to be in the world. We should know, at the very least, how we would like to react in certain situations, how we would like people to experience us. And we can't control how they experience us, but we can do our best to be a certain type of person, to inspire a certain type of energy in people. For the record, adulting is not a goal. It is too vague to be useful. Being a certain type of adult is, or at least can be, a goal. The more specific that goal is, the better, but even something super vague works. The biological desire for resolutions for our emotional and rational minds is very strong. By having a goal of how to handle yourself as an adult, even a vague one, you open up the possibility of overcoming your biological desire for a simple resolution that feels good. Often, especially when young, because the decision felt good in the moment, we concluded in the past that it must have been the correct decision. Now we know that that probably was not true. If it felt great and there was a wonderful sense of resolution to it, it probably wasn't an adult decision. But we probably weren't adults. So it's imperative that we all have some kind of goal as to who we want to be, how we want to conduct ourselves. You know, like men used to want to be just like their fathers and women like their mothers. It was all that they knew. But now the modern human can be just about anything because we have exposure to just about anything. We get to choose who and what we want to pattern ourselves after. If we do not make this conscious choice, our biological instincts to resolve either the rational or emotional will drive us to a less than wise decision. If you have no idea how you want to be in the world because you had just a bunch of garbage adults in your life and you decided that you don't want anything to do with them and you don't want to be anything like them, bro, same. There was a long 20-something years of my life where it was like that. So let me introduce you to a god among fiction writers, Brandon Sanderson. Fiction here, stick with me, I promise. Fiction here is absolutely life-saving. It really, really is. Brandon Sanderson, specifically, I call him Brandy Sandy because I think it's adorable. I love everything that he writes. I love everything I've read from him. Most of his trilogies, like each book in the trilogy is like 48 hours long if you do audiobooks like I do. And I've listened to most of them 3-4 times, beginning to end, sometimes back to back. They're amazing. His stories are profound and complex, and his characters really, really, really make you think. Often one of the main characters, or more than one of the main characters in his books, have really relatable traits to me. I find myself feeling a kinship to many of the characters at different points in the book. And like any book, there are decisions that the character must make, and by virtue of being in the book, we are privy to their thought processes that kind of go into the decisions that they make. And that's really helpful, because just like the late 90s was filled with WWJD bracelets, like what would Jesus do, I find myself, like, when I'm at a complete loss, wondering about what in the world to do or how to act about something, I can ask myself, what would Calvin do? Or what would Dalinar do? I can ask myself about these favorite characters, the ones that I admire, and be like, well, what would that guy do? And be like, well, he might do that, and that's pretty close, but I would do something maybe a little bit like this. But it gives me a clue. And I think there's a wisdom in this, because it not only works for me, it's worked for many friends, and it's the nature of art and epics throughout all of time. From the Iliad and the Odyssey to every great myth, I find myself drawing wisdom from the situations and decisions of the characters in these stories. I think it's always been that way, and I think that's part of the genius of these epics. And I hope with all of my heart that every person listening to this podcast has a goal for themselves and how they want to be in this life. It makes life so much more wonderful, because it gives you a sense of control. It also means that you can let yourself down by not reaching that goal, but that's a part of it. That's a part of it, is being on the hook. Some people have had such a hard start to life that surviving seems to be enough. If that's you, or you're in a place where everything has changed and you are really looking for direction, consider looking into your favorite pastimes, especially in art and fiction and story, and draw inspiration from the contents inside. Find a story or a person that resonates with you, that inspires you to be your best self, and make being a little more like them your goal. And even better if you do this with fiction characters, because then they're not real and they can't disappoint you. So, like, I really love Brandy Sandy. I love Brandy Sanderson. If you don't know him, read his stuff. If you don't have a goal or anybody that you look up to these fake characters. I found fiction really, really late in my life. I could only read nonfiction until I was about 25 years old, and I finally took a Shakespeare course and opened up myself to fiction after that, because I took myself way too seriously. But reading these things and seeing these characters put into really high stakes situations and seeing how they behave and how they balance things, you get to see good and bad, ugly and different, silly. You get to see how many ways there are to deal with a situation, and then you get to choose which way resonates most with you, and then use that as your goal, because you do have to have a goal. The wise mind needs a place to exist, and the place that it exists is as an umbrella over top of and in between the emotional and the rational mind. So to wrap up, I introduce you to the concept of the wise mind from cognitive behavioral therapy. I consider the wise mind to be the adult in my head, the adultiest adult. The wise mind's job is to help us navigate the tension created by our two biological minds, or the emotional and the rational mind, both of which are trying to solve two different problems simultaneously, and that's why they disagree. They're not two sides of the same coin. They're solving two different sets of problems with two different sets of information. In order for the wise mind to show up and do its job, there needs to be a goal that the wise mind can use to help blend the competing desires of our biological minds. Not a rational or an emotional solution, but a solution that brings the entire self together and forward. A goal that can allow for the emotional and rational desires and concerns and can marry them to accomplish something greater. If you aren't getting closer to your personal goals by the decisions that you're making every day, you are just letting biology make your decisions for you. Nothing wrong with that. You can do that. People have been doing it for a very, very, very long time. We're just modern humans now. So it's a lot easier to overcome our biology because we're not constantly searching for food and water and shelter and safety. That's why we need a wise mind. That's why we need to know what it feels like when our wise mind is active. You know what it feels like when you experience fear or love or terror or joy or sadness. You know what it feels like in your bodies. Imagine how different life could be if you knew what wisdom felt like. Thank you again. If you've made it this far, thanks for hanging out with me. I hope that you got something cool out of this. It was really just my desire to try to translate what it feels like in my body when I know I'm making, quote, good decisions, when I'm making good adulty decisions. And this has been important to me right now because my dog has cancer, and it's really, really hard because it is aggressive and it is eating her fast. And she's been my best friend for 12 years. And I have a lot of emotions about it. But because of my medical background, I also have a lot of thinking I'm able to do about it. And just like marriage, mortgages, and management, this situation is forcing me to blend my rational and emotional minds because there is no clear resolution for either one. So this has been at the forefront of my mind, and I hope it's been helpful. I love you all, and remember, stay blessed and stay uncomfortable.